So welcome everyone. My name is Penny Condoll and tonight's presentation is Better Facilitation with a Partner. We're going to talk about co-facilitation for brain injury support group facilitators. And I'm really lucky to have with me tonight Craig Sicilia. Hi Craig.
Hi everybody. It's nice to be here tonight.
Brain injury support group is our BISGN tournament, but she is here with us. As we go through, I encourage you to participate if you'd like to raise your hand. To get Craig or I to stop and answer a question or to give us a little bit of your feedback, we'd love to have that.
Yes, we would, yeah. And you guys have so much valuable stuff. I mean, so we'll learn more from you than you will us probably. Absolutely.
Craig and I did this presentation last Tuesday with a group of facilitators online, and I actually added some things from what they shared with us. So a lot of this we learn as we go. So our objective for tonight is Craig and I are going to talk about some of the roles, and then we want to talk about how do you find a co-facilitator. We want to talk about what helps to create a successful relationship. Go ahead, Craig. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. No.
Okay. And also, we want to do that by defining and helping to look at what are some of the strengths and interests in your group, and we'll have a conversation about that. The last part of the presentation, there's actually about 5 or 6 different slides, and we're going to talk about some specific things that you can do before, during, and after a meeting with your co-facilitator specifically to help create a good relationship and be able to make a relationship where you both are equally participating and not getting overwhelmed, which is an important one, and we'll talk about that tonight also. So as Craig and I were putting this together, we thought probably one of the best things to do is recognizing that some facilitators in our Washington state haven't facilitated before, so we wanted to define what facilitation actually is. So Wikipedia defines facilitation as someone who helps a group of people understand their common objective of taking a particular position in the discussion. Another way to say this, the simple way, is that facilitators provide the process to help a group either discuss an issue, make a decision, solve a problem.
Oh, definitely true.
Yeah. Craig, did you have anything you wanted to add to that definition of facilitator?
Yeah, and also brainstorm where the group's going to go, what direction in the future.
Absolutely. And we're going to drill down kind of some differences between characteristics, skills, but we thought it would be kind of good just to put on the table. Sometimes as I talk to people who are thinking of becoming a facilitator, I recognize they don't really understand that facilitation is not necessarily the leader of the pack or they really are kind of the host who helps to help a group move in a process and move in a way. And that's the way Craig and I see ourselves as facilitators also. Suzanne, you had your hand up.
Absolutely.
Did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I was writing down the definition of a facilitator on the screen before this one, and I didn't quite get it all down.
I'd be happy to go back. And I also, as soon as we finish this, I'm going to send this slide to you because there is a lot of information. When we start getting into the other ones, there's, you may see 10 to 15 bullet points, which you're not really supposed to put on slides. But some of these ideas I think are really co-facilitators for a while. They're a really good reminder about some of the things you can do to strengthen that relationship.
And as we know, support groups are all about relationships. It's the social part of us re-exercising our social part of us.
There you go. Absolutely. So I'm going to do a quick polling question. And so you're going to see a question come up in just a second. There we go. So all of you should have the question in front of you. Do you have a co-facilitator for your group?
Yes.
There we go.
Oh, no.
Very good. So it looks like 67% said no. So that's wonderful. I'm really glad that we asked, because what I'm guessing is that you may be thinking about adding a co-facilitator. Maybe that's part of the reason that brought you to the meeting today. Suzanne, is it okay if I move forward on this one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the skills of an effective facilitator. And Craig and I are just going to kind of go through these simply, and I don't want to have to read all of these on the screens to you. Craig, could you kind of tell the group what you think of as an effective facilitator? What are some of the things that...
Well, you know, and as we all know, every group is so different, but I think you need to have the energy. People are drawn toward the energy, and you got to have patience. Lack of patience is the key to having a group that doesn't succeed. So, got to have a lot of patience, and motivation and a little OCD don't hurt.
Right. I think Jennifer Peliquin added a beautiful one that I've got down here, and that was empathy.
Yeah, we can't see your screen, Penny, by the way. You need to put the poll down.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. I
I
didn't recognize that I didn't have that. Okay. Now we can see it right. All right.
There we go.
So here's a list of skills of an effective facilitator, and of course there's more, and I'd love to hear from you guys what you think are some important skills. Some of the ones that I think that I've found important in the role as a brain injury support group facilitator is the ability to resolve conflict. Sometimes is an important one. It's also important often in our groups to energize the groups. One of the ones that Craig and I had fun with is use humor successfully. The list we had originally said uses humor, and it's important that you use that successfully, right?
Yeah, or unsuccessfully. Either way, we think we're funny.
That's right. Another important skill of an effective facilitator is the ability to paraphrase or summarize. And so sometimes that is really beneficial when we have members that speak for a long time, and being able to help them paraphrase and summarize helps to sometimes bring people back on topic.
Right, and as well it helps us understand what they're really trying to say.
Absolutely.
Sometimes by repeating what they're saying, because sometimes we just have to repeat what they're saying because it comes out interesting.
Exactly. And also allows an opportunity for people to learn how to articulate. The other one I like is asking probing questions, and this is one of the skills that I really enjoy as a facilitator, is being able to turn questions back to the group that helps to evoke conversation, especially now that I understand the groups and I know the groups and what directions they want to go. Asking probing questions often when I do the initial round, when you introduce yourself, I love to have a question that helps, a probing question that gets kind of the juices flowing about what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I call them icebreakers.
Icebreakers, that's a good way, yeah. So do any of you have any other suggestions of what might be some good skills? We're going to talk about characteristics, which is a little bit different. As we look at this list of skills, and one of the reasons why I thought this was important to talk about as we talk about co-facilitators is as you think about adding a co-facilitator, these are things that I would really look for in a co-facilitator. And I would also recognize that if my co-facilitator didn't know how to do some of these things, for instance, uses visual aids effectively, so perhaps this is, visual aid might be the whiteboard, or it could be the project meeting hand out agenda notes, those kind of things, if your co-facilitator didn't know how to do that. You know, these are things that it's important to understand so you can know how to fill in the gaps or understand other ways of making those tasks happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's kind of nice when we get a facilitator that sometimes has opposite or different qualities than we often bring to the table, because it allows, it enriches the group and brings a lot of diversity to the group too.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Any comments from Maggie or Michelle or Suzanne?
Honey, I have my hand raised.
Okay.
That's okay. I don't know if it would be considered a skill or perhaps a characteristic of an effective facilitator, but I think that impartiality is very important to put in there. In other words, when it comes to resolving conflict, or even when you have members of the group talking and maybe your own personal opinion, it conflicts, is the ability to put aside personal feelings or being impartial is very critical.
Thank you so much, Maggie. That's beautiful. When we get to the slides that talk about before, during, and after the meeting, there's some real specifics, but this is a perfect time because you're absolutely right. That is who I want as a co-facilitator. And these are the kind of discussions that I want to have with that co-facilitator before we get into the meeting. So beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I do apologize. My little window has gone away now. So Craig, would you help me to check the if hands are up?
There are no hands up.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move to the next slide then.
I'll watch for the hands.
Okay. Thank you. So the next slide, here we're going to talk about characteristics of, and I call this an awesome co-facilitator. And actually just took these out of the new startup kit that's on the BISGN.org site. And so these are the characteristics that are described in the startup kit. And these are definitely characteristics that I would look for in a co-facilitator. The ability to be honest, to inspire, positive attitude is important. I left this as behavior management, and I think we couldn't find exactly what the right words for that, but that is an understanding, especially in our groups and with our population, of what to do in these situations when behaviors are an issue.
Yeah, and they will be an issue at time to time.
Right. I also, an awesome co-facilitator would be an effective communicator. Maybe not just with me, but also with the group and with the rest of the community outside. Empathetic. So these were some ones that were added. Leadership and confidence is an important one. Often lack of confidence really shows when you're a facilitator.
And I think that it also rubs off on folks when they feel you're not confident. It gives them a hard feeling.
That's right. So as we do our facilitator trainings, these are some of the things that we talk, that we talk about in leadership and around communication. Some of these characteristics are just, they are how people are, and some aren't. For me, having a co-facilitator who had a really negative attitude would be really challenging. But I could see in some situations where if I had a really hard time maybe standing up for myself or for the group, maybe I would want a co-facilitator who had a little bit more attitude than I did. So I think these are things that are good to look at. Does anyone have any other suggestions?
Yeah, we actually, in one of our groups, we have all of our groups have a sergeant arm, but we have one group that is really a necessary task. He keeps people on task, and he's really good at it, much better at shutting people down than I am. Right. And I have a couple people in that group that need to be shut down pretty quick, otherwise it gets out of hand.
Mm-hmm. How about you guys, Maggie, or has anyone got any comments?
Lou's got a hand up. How about you, Lou? You got a hand up.
Hey, Lou.
Hold on, let me unmute him. He's
Okay.
not.
I didn't
There you go.
see
You are unmuted, Lou.
Thank you.
Welcome, Lou.
Thank you. Nice looking picture.
Wonderful. It's nice to have you. Any
Thank you.
suggestions of other, and you were with us last week, I think, too, weren't you?
Right. Personality.
Yeah. So having a good personality?
Yes.
Nice. Very good. Thanks, Lou.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think I'll move on to the next one. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to find the right co-facilitator. And so the biggest suggestions that Craig and I wanted to share is that it's important to look within your group members to help evaluate their strengths and interests. And it's interesting, the more you know about your group, the more you're going to be able to recognize people who might be ready, might be at their time in their recovery where they're ready for a small task, a small change, or maybe they're ready to actually become a co-facilitator. It's important to tell your group that you're looking for help, without letting your group members know that you're looking for someone to help facilitate your group, to lead with you. They may not know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they would be insulted if you didn't ask that first.
Right. Another important part for people who haven't been facilitators is to explain the benefits of being a facilitator. And we talked a little bit last week about what some of the benefits, and we talked a little bit in the character, but facilitation is great for building people's confidence, increasing your public speaking skills. It's a great tool to help learn leadership, get a voice for yourself, maybe make a real difference in your community. And these are important things as you're starting a conversation, or if you're just starting to fill out whether people would be interested.
It's also very healing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Craig. That's absolutely right. That's a big piece for us, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I don't know if this will come up in a later, this is Suzanne. I don't know if it'll come up in a later slide, but the idea of, now I've lost the word. The idea of having them be on a trial basis.
Yes. So, and that's the last one that we suggest, is let people try out a task before agreeing. And I love this idea. And this is really about allowing people to take on something before they fully sign up as co-facilitators. And for me, this is a really powerful, I think really even before I ask someone to be a co-facilitator with me, I've already recognized whether they are someone who, on their own, comes and asks me if there's something they can do, or recognizes that there's something that they can do. And it is so powerful. We've talked about, and Lou made some beautiful points last week about how powerful it is to let people in your group do those things when they're willing and able to do those.
And one of the things our groups do, and I think you do this as well, Penny, is they vote in who they want each year to facilitate the group.
That's right.
So.
I ask them at the beginning of the year, what do they want to do, what do they want to learn, and who do they want to facilitate for this year? And the group joins it. And as a facilitator, for me, that feels like I am letting the group be in charge of that decision. And this is often when people who I may not have recognized, we have committees like communication committees, we have an activity committee, and so some people get just a small opportunity to participate in a smaller way that doesn't feel so overwhelming. I've had several people tell me that they would love to be a facilitator, it just seems way too overwhelming to them. So just letting people try out small things, I think, is a really good idea. Have you tried that before, Suzanne?
I have asked for help, and it seems to kind of go by the wayside. Mm-hmm. One of the concerns that I have is that I'm sure there are some people that if they thought they could be a facilitator, they're not really appropriate to be a facilitator. Mm-hmm. That's part of the concern that I have about bringing that to the group.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, that from our perspective, from the BISGN perspective, they they would have to pass a background check and, you know, do those more official things. But I think
Right.
you're absolutely right. Before you ask someone, or even before you ask the group, you need to have a good, clear definition of would they be able to do that. One of the things that I've really found when the group votes for it and they understand the consequences of their voting is that often those people who aren't appropriate don't go for those positions. So does that make sense? They're often not
Right.
voted into those positions because the group speak usually does, you know, try to protect itself.
Right. Do you have a list of the things, those things that are unspoken? I mean, you know, that we just, you're probably just know. I know the thing, as far as myself was concerned, you know, the background check, and then, of course, you know, the financial considerations. You know, some of that, some people would not be able to handle.
Sure, absolutely. And I think, you know, this for me has been really important within my group. You know, we talked about we have lots of committees, and, you know, on Craig's side, he's got lots of people doing things. Really being able to spread that, the tasks around within a group. And so if I was going to start talking to someone about being co-facilitator, I would want to be able to tell them all of the tasks that I do as a facilitator, right?
Yes.
And then what I might want to be able to do is talk about what are some of those things that I just talked about that interest you, that you think you would be really good at. And so taking care of the financial piece is not the one that I'm really good at. I have a financial guru who out of my group has always been voted as our treasurer, and so he helps to keep the bookkeeping side of it. So just as an example of being able to really look at what the strengths and interests and the strengths within your group members. And that's really the only role that he plays in that. And so sometimes as a facilitator, being able to understand how we can empower people in different ways is an important piece also.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. And we are going to talk more when these last couple slides are going to be very much more specific about how you can, what kind of things you can do. Any other comments? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about before the meeting. And again, these have got, there's a lot more words in this than I would usually do, but I really like these. So Craig and I are going to kind of talk through. Before the meeting, it's important to schedule good time for planning. So for any of you that have had a facilitator in the past or have worked with a co-facilitator, it's important to do, so maybe this is over coffee or dinner or, you know, some way to be able to connect and schedule that planning time. I think it's also, I apologize, go ahead, Craig. No, you go, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's tough to, if you get desperate sometimes, and I have been in desperate situations, you do desperate things to get facilitators, and then that don't necessarily always work out in the end.
Right.
If you get lucky, it does.
Yes. I think with being a co-facilitator, especially as a person who has a brain injury, I think it's so important to put everything, as much as you can, out on the table. It's really important not to make assumptions about one another. And sometimes in our community this is a challenge because we kind of see, sometimes we see our brain injuries in everybody else. And it sometimes makes us make assumptions. I'm going to really encourage you not to do that. And if you think that it might be an assumption that you're making, put it on the table, say it out loud, or put it in an email just to clarify. And it's really important to try to clarify things. It's also important to take time to talk about your views about topics, especially areas of disagreement. So as co-facilitators, taking some of these hot button topics and you two have a conversation. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree on them, but as facilitators and as the people who are responsible for keeping the safety of the group and helping the group to move forward, it's really important that you understand where each other's coming from. I like this suggestion also, which reminds us to talk about any concerns about potential challenges that our actual people in the group might present. And so being able to share back and forth with another co-facilitator that, you know, Johnny's mother died, maybe, and, you know, this is something that is going to be really challenging for him in the group and to talk about in the group. I think doing that ahead of time really provides an opportunity for co-facilitators to equally support during the meeting.
Absolutely, and one of the things, and I know I don't think any of you got, I think Lou got to see, he was involved in the presentation. We actually have a particular person that we stay where they set every time. Otherwise we end up with problems. And every meeting we have to have it, it's preset, prearranged, and we get pretty good at it after a while.
Yes, that's a great example. You know, what can you do prior to the meeting to help to kind of offset some of those challenges that you may recognize during the meeting. I've got one other slide, but did anyone have any comments about any of these suggestions? No? Okay, we'll go to the next one. Oh, one other one, and that's to review, review each other's triggers at the bottom of the page here. And I think that's a good suggestion also. So another suggestion is to find out when it's okay to interrupt. Jennifer had shared with us last time that it was very clear that they were not supposed to interrupt, and I thought it might be good to have a conversation about, you know, what is the situation that is not okay to interrupt. And there's two co-facilitators working together. I think this is a good thing to understand. Another suggestion is just decide how to keep track of time. And this is often a good task that can be shared with another facilitator. For me, this is one of my worst skills as a facilitator, is keeping track of time, which is why I keep looking at the clock. My perspective is really poor, but if my co-facilitator knows that that's really what I need her to be able to help me with, then she can be more focused on keeping track of time.
And different things, again, work for different groups.
Exactly. And the next one is about how to switch gears, how to stick to the original outline, how to switch gears if you have to. And, you know, this leads me to a conversation about having a backup plan in case the ways, the outline, and I apologize, I've got reverb on someone's computer. Okay, I'm going to try again. I have a really hard time talking when I can hear myself back. Another is, sorry.
I'll figure out who it is, Penny, so as you keep
okay. I'll try. As soon as I start talking and I can hear my voice back, it completely stops my conversation. I think another important tip is that co-facilitators often have signals between each other. Katie Griffith is my co-facilitator here in Tacoma, and her and I definitely have signals as we sit across the table from each other. We've got signals that we've defined ahead of time. We also have signals with our eyes. And the more time you spend together as co-facilitators, you really get better at this. But I think it's great to put some of these on the table. If you see me doing something, pulling my nose or whatever. This means that I lost what that might mean, but as a way to give a signal to another person.
Yeah. And of course, the more you get working with your co-facilitators, the better you are at picking up each other's cues. It becomes pretty natural at a certain point.
Sure, absolutely. And it becomes a dance after you've been together for a while. Another, when I talked about having that conversation about what tasks you do, so as you're initially talking to someone about being your co-facilitator and sharing with them all of the different things that you do, before the meeting it's important to try to divide the facilitation activities fairly. And in our community that might mean that someone has a really hard time with phone calling, but you do a great job at doing phone calls. And so recognizing where those strengths are, I think, is a really good way to divide the tasks of a facilitator evenly.
Absolutely, and then everybody gets to do what they're best at if you divided it right?
Exactly, that's right. And then you can share in the responsibility of bringing the materials and the resources. It's important to get there early and check in before the meeting starts. Allow time to meet people and get in the flow. We talked before, another really important thing that I suggest is to make sure you take a good breath before you get started. Take just a little bit of quiet time, and often having a co-facilitator with you who can, make sure that everything's getting set up and okay, allows you a time maybe for 5 minutes to step out and just be quiet for a second before the meeting actually starts. Might be something that you'd like. Before the meeting, it's important to start talking about how you're going to debrief after the meeting. After a meeting is one of the most powerful ways to become a better facilitator. We're going to talk about what you can do. It may not be directly after the meeting. It might be the next day or a couple days later, but being able to share that. So schedule a time before the meeting when you're going to debrief. Does anyone have any other comments about these suggestions? No?
Well, here, let me unmute. Now I'm hearing the echo again. So, and as I'm going through this, so like when I debrief with my facilitator, co-facilitators, we go out for coffee. That is our debriefing. We meet at a coffee place, have a coffee. Everybody has coffee. I mean, most people have coffees at least. And so, I think, Susan, I have you muted, but if you mute yourself, you can unmute yourself. It was you that was doing the reverb. It took me a little time to figure it out. But coffee is a great way. Start your morning, cup of coffee, 10, 15 minutes, and you also figure out, you get a lot of brainstorming happening too. It's more than just debriefing. It's actually, even though it's just a casual meeting, it's so much more than that when you get the opportunity to just sit outside of a group. Whoops.
Right.
I don't think Susan heard me.
Okay. I'm going to go to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about some tasks, and again, don't try to capture all those. As soon as this meeting's over, I'm going to email this to all of you, so you'll have it. You're welcome to print it out, to share it. For me, these slides I'm printing out, and Katie and I are going to walk through all of these and just make sure that we actually are doing this. So during the meeting, so the meeting's already started. This is a time to remember to keep a professional demeanor at all times, to communicate with each other throughout the meeting. And I don't know if any of you have ever co-facilitated with someone who frankly just kind of ignored you throughout the meeting. It's really important to do eye contact and to continue to try to communicate throughout the meeting. Support and validate one another. And when activities don't require constant attention, it's important to check in with each other. I love this suggestion, which says, even when you're leading an exercise, ask your co-facilitator, do you have anything to add? And so engage them in the process. If you've been a facilitator for a while, sometimes it's easy to slip into that mode where you're the one who's doing all the leading. As you're adding a new co-facilitator, I think that's a really good suggestion.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And here's one that says, assert yourself if your co-facilitator is talking too much. And so this kind of brings up maybe Suzanne's part of Suzanne's question around, is it appropriate to call people on these things? And even for a co-facilitator, just as you have good skills to be a facilitator for a group, you have good skills to maybe use humor some way to help to remind, or maybe you have a signal with your co-facilitator ahead of time that your signal lets them know maybe they have a history of talking too much. Whatever your signal is, that's going to let them know that. And then it's important to remember, yeah, it's important to remember that it's okay to make mistakes. And the last one is take the initiative to step in if your co-facilitator misses an opportunity to address a myth. And so what I liked about many of these different suggestions is that good co-facilitation really is a dance. And if I miss a step and I don't address something that's a myth, or I don't address something that's important for the group, or maybe the group has said to me really clearly, we want you to do this, and I go a different direction, I really want my co-facilitator to be able to address that, to bring it up respectfully in the group. These are conversations that we have outside of the group, even to say, if you needed to say this in a group, it's perfectly fine. But if you don't have these conversations before, these could be really challenging in the middle of a meeting, right? Okay. All right, so are there any suggestions or any comment about the bullets that we have up here?
Yeah, and you might explain, when you say to a myth,
Mm-hmm.
what would you consider a myth that a common myth somebody would bring up?
Okay, so I'll just use a really common one in a support group. I have heard it said, I've had people in my support group say, people with brain injury can't work. They can't work, they can't do that. Facilitator to address it. And for some of these, it may not, these may be things that my group has really decided are important. And if I don't address them, again, this is where I would want my co-facilitator to help me. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, Lou, you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to say? Lou? Do you have yourself muted, Lou, maybe? Huh, okay.
Okay. Sorry, Lou, we didn't hear you.
His hand's back up again. Do you want to try it again, Lou? You probably look at that green microphone up there at the top, Lou. You might have muted yourself. You are not muted on our end. Yeah, you are muted on your end, so I can see the little line. So you can unmute yourself by going up to the green microphone and clicking it once.
No?
Yeah, his hand's up, but I don't think he sees how to unmute himself. So.
Okay.
We see your hand, Lou, but you have yourself muted. You got to go to the green microphone at the top of the little box there.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting for Lou, I'm going to go ahead and move to after the meeting. So the next two slides are going to talk about Lou. Welcome.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
You're perfectly fine. What did you want to
Okay.
share with us?
I'm going back a little bit, but I'll be brief and quick. But I have found friendship within my group. I have made some real good friends.
That's beautiful.
And we socialize, and I bring in the old members going back 17 years to my social events, and that has been a real asset for the... You're welcome.
So, after the meeting, again, the first one is what we've talked about already, and that is that debriefing. We're going to talk a little bit. Really, most of this after the meeting is about that debriefing. And so, one of the suggestions of listen carefully to one another's self-evaluation before giving feedback. And I think this is a beautiful thing to set between co-facilitators. Is that when we do the debrief, and then I'd love to hear how you think that you did, and then that we can give feedback to each other. And I think this is a really powerful tool for becoming a better facilitator, because as I evaluate myself, and I do at the end of every meeting, I do it in my head, I think about what I'd like to do better, what did I miss. Sometimes I'm driving home and I recognize I really missed the boat on those pieces. I really missed what they were trying to tell me. And so in that self-evaluation, especially sharing it with someone that I've decided is going to be my partner in this, my co-facilitator, gives me an opportunity to grow for myself, but also to allow someone to support me. So if I've said, I really don't want to do that again, it can help support me by saying, you know, Penny, you had shared with me that you didn't want to do that.
What? Yes. I can't hear you.
I think Lou agrees completely. So I liked this suggestion of listening carefully.
Absolutely. That's why God gave us one mouth and two ears.
There you go. Very good. And so these suggestions are on that same realm. Talk about what worked well, examine what doesn't work. I don't know that, you know, this doesn't need to be an arduous bad task because we give each other grace as we're going through. But it is really, really valuable to be able to have that conversation, especially if you can find someone that you trust to have that conversation with. This last suggestion of use written evaluations in your startup kit out to your support group, and different groups do this in different ways as a written evaluation to help evaluate how you're doing, how they feel the group is doing. If there's any other suggestions, I want to say it's probably around page 20, 22 in that startup kit. You'll be able to find written evaluations. Facilitator or not, maybe asking someone to try for a month or two, and then asking the group to help to evaluate. So I wouldn't be scared of bringing that conversation to the group that you're looking for a co-facilitator, especially if the person who signs up knows that they're going to be evaluated by the group. Is that helpful?
Susan, go ahead. You can talk. Did you want to?
Okay. Yes, that's fine. Thank you for the suggestion.
And
the organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.